Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, or as I like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. Today I am in Studio One at the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society and connected by Zoom to a unbelievably accomplished guest. He is a musician, an author, a record producer, neuroscientist. I mean, the list goes on and on. Mr. Daniel Levitin. Dan, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you, Jefferson, for taking the time to squeeze me into the program.
That's so great. For anyone who doesn't know, just check out Dan's Wikipedia page, and there's plenty of information there. But the way that I kind of began to hear about him was the This Is Your Brain on Music book, and The World in 6 Songs. And then, Lordy B, when I went to Victor Wooten's Spirit of Music camp, Dan was an instructor, and met him there. He even played my guitar. And so we certainly share, I think, an affinity and reverence for Wooten Woods. That's quite an experience. And you even went to China I guess it wasn't to China, was it? It was to meet with the Dalai Lama with Victor.
The Dalai Lama was exiled from China many years ago, right, from the Tibet region. So he's running the government in exile in the northeastern tip of India. Yeah, way up in the Himalayas in Dharamshala. And wow. Yes, Victor and I went and visited him almost a year ago today.
Right, and that was that was for your new book you have coming out. This is like your 6th book or something, I think, right?
Yeah, it's for a book that comes out January of 2020. It's called Successful Aging: A Neuroscientist Explores the Power and Potential of Our Lives. And in addition to the science, I wanted to talk to some people who are really maximizing their potential in their, what you might call old age, like the Dalai Lama, who just published his 125th book at age 83.
Oh, my goodness. That's amazing.
And I mean, I really liked number 47, so I didn't know how he was going to top him. But
oh, gosh. Well, that's amazing. Anyway, so I know you started music really young in your life, and you played a number of different instruments. Do you mind just talking a little bit about the sort of that trajectory, how music kind of, how it tapped you on the shoulder? Did you have music in the house, and why you continued to play and, be in bands and all these things, and then how you ended up writing this amazing book, This Is Your Brain on Music? How did you get from point A to point B on that?
Well, like many kids, I heard music. I liked it. I wanted to play it. We had a piano in the house. And unlike many kids today, though, I had a great opportunity, which was having just the dumb luck of being born in California in the 50s and 60s. Well, I was born in the 50s, but being raised in the 50s and 60s, when the public school programs had very strong and robust free music programs. And any student of my generation in California who wanted to play an instrument in most school districts, the district had a room full of instruments, and you could take them home, and you'd get instruction on them. And so I did that. I loved it. Got interested in how it all works, and again, just dumb luck. I was in a district with a very talented instructor and trumpet player named Buzz Edie, E-D-I-E. And when I was in junior high school, he gave me some private tutorials in music theory and conducting. And so I conducted, he'd allow me to conduct the wind ensemble and the jazz band and the pep band, things like that, which got me inside the music in a different way. And I pursued this through high school. Again, just a lucky occurrence. I was in a high school stage band, as a lot of kids are. or at least were in those days.
Uh-huh.
And Mel Torme came through town and hired us to back him up at a concert at the Santa Monica Civic.
Wow.
I don't know how he chose us, but we, the leader of that high school band, Warren Balfour, was a well-known LA session musician who did a lot of television and movie work, and his side hustle was being a high school band director. But you may remember the Flintstones theme.
Yes.
There's sort of trumpet solo at the very end that goes up to a double high C, and that's Warren.
So you were just really sort of immersed in it. Boy, I wish we had those kind of programs for every kid nowadays, you know. Ooh.
I do too. Ben Folds and I have been going around and giving talks about the importance of music education and music therapy, for that matter, which we can touch on a bit. I do feel that music education is important in that if it's done right, it's kind of like team sports. You're working with other people to achieve a common goal. It's not competitive in the same way. Yeah, you might compete for first chair violin, but it's not the same as competing against another team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'd have battle of the bands, but it was different. And I think that it also helped me, anyway, to get in better touch with my emotions through listening and playing music, something that might not otherwise have happened because I had all these interests in science and math, too, which are not particularly emotional
right.
topics. So anyway, I'll give you the brief answer to your question. After high school, I went to college. I attended Berklee College of Music for a while. I also attended MIT, where I studied science. I ended up dropping out of college and working as a session musician and record producer for 15 years. And then when the music business started to fall apart, a bunch of us decided we should have a backup plan. Not that we wanted to stop doing music, and we didn't, but that, looked like we might have to have a plan B. Mm-hmm. And a number of us went back to school to get the degrees we never got. By us, I mean people in my cohort. And I decided to go back and get a bachelor's degree, which I'd never gotten, and I ended up taking it in cognitive psychology. And I was having such a good time, and it didn't interfere with my record producing and playing, so I continued on to graduate school. I got hired as a professor after that in a psychology department at McGill University. And when you're a professor, at a research university, you're expected to do research and teach. The teaching is really a minor part of it. And my research interests had evolved to be the neuroscience of music and the psychology of music.
That's really cool.
It was a way to tie everything together.
So you started researching, writing papers, et cetera, and becoming knowledgeable about that. And I guess from some of the things that I've read, your books, other books, Lena Manis's book, the science has really changed, or I guess really come into its own with the research they're now able to do on the brain to tell us things that we didn't really know before. There was this left brain, right brain thing, but it's kind of an all brain thing, music, isn't it?
You're exactly right, Jefferson. So, yeah, the technology, again, dumb luck, and I emphasize dumb in my case, because none of the things, I'm the kind of person who always made a lot of plans for what I wanted my future to look like. Mm-hmm. And I still do. And none of the things that I try to make happen ever happen. I can't think of a single instance. Instead, a bunch of other stuff happens, and totally out of my control. But one of the things is that I happened to be studying neuroscience when there was this rapid development and advances in technology for studying the brain, neuroimaging in particular, which allowed us to scan brains and see what was going on. And I was able to learn that technique and then apply it. And yeah, I was writing academic papers that were really just read by people in the field. But I got the attention of an editor in New York in 2004 who wanted to publish a book on the psychology of music or the neuroscience of music, either one, because there was this explosion of new research.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked me to write the book, and I said no. I was untenured. Books don't count towards tenure. I had to publish more papers. Publish or perish, they say.
Yes.
But he was persistent. I gave him the names of other people. They turned him down. He circled back around. Then he finally came up to Montreal and took me out to dinner and persuaded me to write this little book. And he and I figured it would maybe sell 800 or 1,000 copies, the book that is This Is Your Brain on Music. And that would have been good enough for him. He just, he wanted to publish a book on the topic. And so we put the book out.
It did better than that.
It did. We were astonished when it sold more than 1,000 copies.
Yeah.
And what happened was people began talking about the book, and that opened up a lot of doors for me. For one thing, a lot of the musicians I had known and worked with in the studio in the 80s and 90s, when the book came out in 2006, and producers and record company execs, they got in touch and said, "Oh, this is really interesting. Thanks for writing this. Let's play together sometime." And it's how I met Victor Wooten, actually, was through that book.
Through that book.
And then Ella Manis wanted to do a documentary about music in the brain. She had read the book. She wanted to base the documentary on the book. And so we did this film for PBS called The Music Instinct?
I think so, yes. I've seen it, yeah. I think.
And then around the same time, CTV in Canada, in association with National Geographic, also wanted to do a documentary. And we had to balance. They also in both documentaries they wanted me to kind of be the host and the explainer of things, and they wanted to base it on the book. So we had to negotiate a way to make the two films different enough.
Yeah.
Which we did. The Canadian film had Sting in it, and Wycliffe Jean and Michael Bublé and Feist. The American film had Yo-Yo Ma and Bobby McFerrin and others.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I really do. I've kind of all of a sudden in the last few years gotten into doing my own sort of private research, just to try to learn a lot of these things. So what would you say, having, really studied music and the brain for quite some time and written on it, and what are the main findings or insights or whatever that, just that somebody on the street or anybody it would be important to know, or that you think are sort of the main takeaways of what you learned in that effort?
Well, as you intimated a moment ago, we used to think that music was in the right brain and math was in the left or things like that. But with the new technology that you mentioned, we now know that was a vast oversimplification. There are two halves of the brain, but it doesn't map that neatly. And in fact, music activates pretty much every region of the brain that has so far been mapped.
Wow.
So as you put it, it's a whole brain function. That's something. In terms of findings that people can use, I always say that I'm doing basic science because trying to understand how it all works, you never know what the applications will be when you set out to do it. But some of the things we're finding is that music can reduce pain and preoperative anxiety in hospital settings. That's an important take-home message. And I'm working with colleagues to try and get the word out. I just, in a month or so, I'll have the lead article coming out in the journal Music and Medicine.
Wow.
Which is about what we've learned that music does in therapeutic contexts. In the hands of a trained music therapist, it can combat depression, and certainly most of us by now have seen that viral clip of Henry, the patient in a nursing home in the movie Alive Inside, who is brought to life by music. And Oliver Sacks talking through what happens there. So the therapeutic benefits of music are one. Also, for patients with dementia, it's beginning to appear that you can't cure dementia yet. And that's not going to happen through music or through anything we can do with diet and exercise. The only way that'll happen is with some sort of gene therapy or something along those lines that will be able to dissolve senescent cells and neurofibrillatory tangles. But I think that music can help to create a reduction in anxiety in people with dementia who are disoriented. Can help connect them to themselves and to the people around them, and it can help them to become more resilient.
Wow, it's such a, I don't know, it's so powerful. How about this statement that kind of attracted me in your book from the beginning, but I just keep thinking about that music may have helped humans become who they are, or how did it shape us so that we're different than chimpanzees or squirrels or something? How would you sort of explain that? Or
so I alluded to this very briefly in Brain on Music, but then the follow-up to that book, The World in 6 Songs, the subtitle is How the Human Brain, how the musical brain created human nature, is the subtitle. And yeah, that's the argument, and the idea is that in order to do music, to perform music, to write it, to appreciate it, you have to have a number of perceptual and memory processes that work in a rather sophisticated way. As you're listening to a piece of music, take a Beethoven symphony, which is going through key modulations and such. For him to think of that and for you to enjoy it requires that you keep some sort of memory trace of the tonal center of the piece, the starting note, the starting key, even as it traverses through a harmonic landscape of other keys. So those modulations mean something because you're carrying a memory of where you've been. And the final resolution of a symphony feels good because you feel as though you've been on some sort of a journey, a metaphorical journey through musical space, but it's like a journey through physical space, in a landscape where you end up at the desired spot and you saw all this neat stuff along the way. And you have to be able to distinguish one instrument from another because there are often these overlapping, layered parts going on. Just Beethoven's Fifth, which I'll use as an example because it's one of the most familiar pieces of Western music. You've got this basic 4-note motif: bum 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 bum, short 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 long, and it shows up in different guises about 253 times in the first movement.
Wow.
There's some debate about whether it's 252 or 253 because of an ambiguous statement in the French horns where they go bum, 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 bum. So, it's inverted, it's upside down, but it does seem to echo the... So all of that requires some sophisticated brain mechanisms that other animals don't have, as far as we know. And moreover, it requires that we represent things that aren't there in front of us. In other words, take cave paintings. Mm-hmm. The first humans who painted antelopes and buffalo on caves, they weren't there's no way they had the live model in front of them. They're too deep in the cave.
Uh-huh.
They had to register in their memory these details and then go out and put them on the wall. And then as they're drawing, they've got to compare what they're actually doing with their mental image of what the thing looked like. They got to make adjustments if it's not right. This kind of back and forth is a very sophisticated and very human kind of operation. And so cave painting and music require this ability to hold an idea in mind even when it's not in front of you. And I think ultimately those abilities led to things like mutual cooperation and wanting to pass on education through schools, setting up systems of justice so that the weak would not be dominated by the powerful, and that kind of representational thinking, that kind of memory, and the kind of thinking about the future that goes together with that. Very human qualities.
Wow, that's fascinating and such a good explanation, because I didn't realize sort of that rationale. But it sure does seem, that music it just helps. It helps me. It's a hard thing to do, but it's rewarding. It comes naturally sort of to listen, but not necessarily to play. There's so many intricacies about it. I'm really thankful that you're working on these things for us.
Well, thank you.
Bringing it to light. And you mentioned you met Victor Wooten as a result of the book. How did that happen? And then, you guys have become good friends, and how did that transpire?
Well, actually, he and I first met in 1994 when I went to a Bela Fleck concert in Eugene, Oregon.
Really?
Maybe it was 95. And Bela had come into the airport and didn't have a ride to the gig. And through somebody I think I knew his publicist or road manager or something. And so I agreed to pick Bela up at the airport. And I drove him to the gig, and we had a nice talk, and I met Victor and Roy, Future Man.
Yeah.
But, I enjoyed them, but I didn't stay in touch with them. But around the time that 6 songs came out, the 92nd Street Y in New York City, which is a performance venue. It's not just a YMCA. It's not just a gym. They've got a big performance hall, 800,000-seat hall. They asked me to do a series of events on music and the brain and to invite a musician along to each one. And I remember inviting Victor. I had read his book, The Music Lesson. He had read mine. I'd never met him. But Anthony Wellington made the connection. I had met Anthony at a book event.
Wow.
In Washington, D.C., where he lives. Anthony, the bass player and educator. And I remember Victor and I got together. We both got in late the night before the gig. And we were staying at the same hotel, and we met in one of our rooms and just talked for about an hour about what we were going to do. We had a radio appearance scheduled the next morning at WNYC to promote the show and the book. And at the radio show, Soundcheck, hosted by John Schaefer, John had asked us to bring our instruments and to play a number or two, which we did. Having never played together before. But that's Victor.
Oh, yeah.
Victor said, what do you want to play? And I said, well, I've been working on this song, Gentle on My Mind by John Hartford. And he said, oh, okay, how does it go? And I said, well, it's D major 7, D major 6. It goes down to, as a transition where it goes to an E minor A7. I said, I can write it out for you. He says, no, I'll just follow along. So he jumped right in, and it sounded like we'd been playing it together for years. And then we also did My Life, his song. And he just said, just do a funk vamp on A minor 7 to D9. And then there's a turnaround that goes F, G. I think it's just F, G, and then E9 to bring you back to the A. You know, the 5, 5, 9, 5, 7, 9. So, yeah, we played that the first time. It sounded great. And then we just went to the gig that night and played the same 2 tunes along with a couple others we improvised, and everything was fantastic.
Wow. And then you continued to stay in touch, and had you gone to his camp before recently? The Wooten Woods
I've been
camp?
to his camp 3 or 4 times now.
3 or 4 times?
The most recent being last year. Did I meet you last year or earlier?
Last year, yeah.
Yeah. I remember borrowing your guitar and talking with you there. I couldn't remember if that's the first time we met.
Yeah, and to me,
yeah, we became friends. When he comes through California, if he's playing here on his own, not with Bela, he'll invite me to the show, and he'll invite me up to do a song or two, and we've done some speaking events together through the American Psychological Society for one of the neuroscience conferences.
Well, your book was certainly, to me anyway, a very sort of a transformative type book, because it really did add all these other aspects of, the scientific aspects of playing music. Of course, Victor's book is completely different, but that was that was really influential on me. And it's kind of a, quirky novel in a sense, but just...
It's one of my favorite books. I recommend it to everybody.
Oh.
It's a wonderful book. It's called A Music Lesson. It's not really a music lesson. It's really a life lesson.
Yeah.
Victor is such a remarkable person, and that comes through every word. It just his care, his love, his respect for others and for nature, it all comes through.
Yeah, there was of course there were many things in the book that are I think pretty profound, but the one thing that just grabbed me and continued, hammering on me was when Michael, the teacher in the book, says, intention is the key to everything. And I've thought about that an awful lot. I've done sort of my own writing about, peace and forgiveness and different love and fear and that kind of stuff. And it really struck me. And so when we were thinking about setting up the Planetary Gig Society, it seemed like, what are we trying to do? Well, making connections through music, but with an intention of actually doing whatever to try to make the world a better place, whether
I'd like to introduce you to my friend Jonathan Dimmock, who is a wonderful musician in Northern California who runs something called the Resonance Foundation. And their aim is to try and use music to promote world peace.
Well, there you go. They probably got a little bit more of a organizational thing going on, but we got a website and doing these podcasts. This is, I think, the 97th podcast I've done, and just talking with people about this to, add to the conversation, whatever. I mean, what do you think about that thought? How can music make a difference in society to create a better world in some way?
Well, like anything that we humans get our hands on, whether it's medicine or sex or music, we can use it for good or we can use it for evil. We can use it to bring people together. We can use it to separate them. The science that's relevant to this is that we found in our laboratory that when people listen to music, their brain waves synchronize with one another's.
Entrainment.
Yeah. But the actual brain waves themselves start to synchronize. And so my thought that I shared with Jonathan is that, if that's happening, it could be that promotes compassion and empathy. And maybe when world leaders sit down to negotiate some treaty or something, they should be listening to music together first.
I have talked to some people who've suggested that. I think it's a good idea. Have a little jam, have a little sing-along before they start talking. Yeah. Dan, I really appreciate your taking the time to do this, and what you've done with the books and all, for music for us, I think has just been so amazing and great, and very, very appreciative. I hope that I'm going to check out your new book too, because I'm at the point where I could use a little bit of, assistance in thinking about aging as well. So I hope other people will look at that.
I think we all could at any age.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jefferson, for making time for me and for being such an interesting person yourself.
Well, thanks very much, and I am sure that we'll see you around somewhere.
I look forward to it.
All right, everybody. Daniel Levitin, thank you so much. You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.